She caught her boyfriend in bed with her own sister. But that wasn't the worst part. Because while she was running through his family's mansion in tears, bleeding and humiliated, she crashed into a man far more dangerous than the cheater she left behind. Older, colder, untouchable. And by morning, she found out that man was not only her professor, he was her boyfriend's father. And he had a past so dark it could destroy both of them.
Heels. That night, Isabella Ricci learned that betrayal did not always come with warning. Sometimes it wore a familiar smile, borrowed your trust for months, and waited until the exact right moment to split your life open. Heels. She opened Adrian Vale's bedroom door during a crowded gala in Milan and found her boyfriend in bed with her sister, not flirting, not half-dressed and trying to explain away a mistake. There was nothing unclear about what she saw. Heels. Adrian's shirt lay on the floor beside Sophia's red heels. The sheets were twisted around them. The room smelled like perfume, sweat, old money, and something rotten enough to make her stomach turn over. For 1 second, nobody moved. Heels. Then Adrian turned first. Bella. She lifted a trembling hand. Don't. Sophia looked startled, yes, but only for an instant. After that, she just looked annoyed. Heels. Annoyed, as if Isabella had walked in at an inconvenient time instead of standing there watching the two people she should have been able to trust tear her apart. That was the part that would stay with her the longest. Not only what they did, Heels. How little guilt there was on either face. How long? Isabella asked. Sophia rolled her eyes like she was tired already. Does it matter? Yes. Adrian sat up more slowly now, the panic in him starting to surface. 3 months. 3 months. Heels. 3 months earlier, Isabella had still been in Lake Como with him, taking sunset pictures and thinking every soft look meant something. 3 months earlier, she had still believed Sophia would cross 100 lines in life, but never this one. Heels. 3 months earlier, she still thought family meant at least one thing. Sophia tugged the sheet over herself, suddenly interested in modesty. You had to know this wasn't serious, she said. Isabella stared at her, then at Adrian. Heels. Then back at the woman who had shared her last name and her childhood and now sat in bed with the man Isabella had been planning to build a future around, and something inside her turned cold, not calm, not healed, not strong, just cold. Get out, Heels. Sophia snapped when Isabella didn't answer. You're embarrassing yourself. That was the moment Isabella understood something she should have learned years ago. Some people do the cruel thing first and then act offended that you reacted to it. Heels. She turned and walked out. No screaming, no shattered vase, no theatrical scene. Just heels on marble, one step after another, while her body shook hard enough to make her vision blur. The palazzo was enormous. Heels. All polished stone and vaulted ceilings and portraits of dead men who had probably ruined lives without ever raising their voices. Old Milan money. The kind that never needed to announce itself because every corridor already knew its name. Heels. And it felt obscene that the place could stay so beautiful while her life had just split open upstairs. She took the first side hallway she saw, blinking fast, trying not to cry in public. Somewhere behind her, a string quartet was still playing. Heels. Somewhere downstairs, people were still laughing into crystal glasses, still leaning toward each other in tailored silken diamonds, completely unaware that something ugly had just happened above their heads. Heels. Then she saw a door standing slightly open, warm light spilling into the corridor. She stepped inside without thinking. The room was a study, dark wood. Bookshelves stacked to the ceiling, leather chairs. Heels. A fire burning low in the hearth, even though it was June. The kind of room that made people lower their voices without being told. She only got 3 steps in before she walked straight into someone. Strong hands caught her before she hit the floor. Heels. I'm sorry, she said automatically, trying to pull away. Heels. The man didn't release her right away. You're bleeding. She touched her temple and looked at her fingers. Blood. She must have clipped the door frame when she stumbled in. It's nothing. Sit. He said it quietly. Heels. But there was no mistaking the command in it. She looked up. He was older, late 40s, maybe 50, dark hair gone silver at the temples, a scar through one eyebrow, impeccable suit, hard face, not handsome in a soft way. Not at all. Heels. He looked like a man shaped by discipline, control, and consequences. The kind of man who had spent years being obeyed and had no patience left for repeating himself. He disappeared into the adjoining bathroom and came back with a medical kit. Heels. Keeps happening? She asked weakly, just to cover how rattled she was, not to guests. That almost made her laugh. He knelt in front of her and opened the kit. This will sting. It did. She flinched when he cleaned the cut, but his hands were steady. Feels careful, efficient. Feels. The tenderness was somehow more unsettling than the pain. What is your name? He asked. Isabella. He repeated it like he was testing the shape of it. Bad night, Isabella? A laugh escaped her that sounded ugly even to her own ears. You could say that. Heels. He taped a bandage into place and leaned back on his heels. Do you want to tell me what happened? Not even a little. Something almost like amusement touched his mouth. Fair enough. For a moment, the room stayed quiet except for the fire. Feels. Then Isabella really looked at him. The confidence, the space, the way the whole room felt like an extension of him. This is your house, she said. What makes you think that? She let out a tired breath. Because you're not moving like a guest. Feels. That earned her a real reaction. Observant. I'm not, she said. If I were, I wouldn't have believed Adrian Vale loved me. Everything about him changed at the name. Adrian? She shut her eyes for a second. Your son, I'm guessing. Feels. He did not answer. He didn't need to. A hollow laugh escaped her. His jaw tightened. What did he do? Her eyes flicked to the decanter on the desk. He noticed, walked over, poured 2 glasses of whiskey, and handed her one. Drink, Feels, he said, then answer. The first swallow burned all the way down. Then she said, I found him in bed with my sister. The man went very still. How long? 3 months. He exhaled through his nose, slow and controlled. Feels. Like anger was something he had learned to keep in a locked room. She told me I was embarrassing myself by caring, Isabella said. He looked into the fire for a beat, then back at her. My son is an idiot. It was so blunt that despite everything, Feels. She almost smiled. Most men are. That may be true, he said, lifting his glass slightly. But sleeping with your girlfriend's sister takes a special level of stupidity. She stared into the whiskey. Maybe I just wasn't enough. No. She looked up. Feels. No, he said again, quieter now. Do not do that to yourself. Their choices say everything about them and nothing about your worth. You don't even know me. I know enough. He set his drink down. I know you walked out instead of putting on a show. Feels. I know you came in here bleeding and still apologized. I know you're trying to blame yourself because it is easier than admitting the people closest to you were selfish. His gaze held hers. That tells me plenty. Something shifted in her chest. Not healing, Feels. Nothing that easy. But something loosened. Then he asked, why did you love him? The question surprised her because it had nothing to do with the scene upstairs and everything to do with the parts of her that had made it possible. Feels. She turned the glass slowly in her hand. I don't think I really loved him, she admitted. I think I loved what it meant to be chosen by someone like Adrian. It felt like I'd won something. And? She gave a small, bitter shrug. Feels. Turns out the box was empty. That got a real smile out of him, faint and short-lived. Most boxes are. She looked at him over the rim of the glass. What's your name? Vincenzo? Just Vincenzo? For now, that made her smile for the first time all night. Feels. A servant appeared with food after a quick call from him. Cheese, fruit, bread. Small sandwiches arranged on silver. She said she wasn't hungry. He ignored her. She ate anyway. Only after she had half finished one did he ask, better? A little. Good. Feels. He sat across from her, one ankle over his knee, whiskey untouched in his hand now. You'll leave when the guests are gone, he said. Not before. She nodded. He did not ask more questions. He did not pry. Feels. He did not offer polished sympathy or recite empty truths about fate, lessons, or timing. He just sat there and gave her room to breathe. Sometimes that is more powerful than comfort. Sometimes what saves you is not being handled. It is being seen. Feels. When the house finally quieted down, he stood. My driver will take you home. You don't have to do that. I know. She gave him her address. A small apartment in a neighborhood that had nothing in common with this place or the people drifting through it. Feels. He relayed instructions downstairs, then walked her out himself. At the car, he opened the door and said, Take care of yourself, Isabella Ricci. She froze. How do you know my last name? But he only closed the door. As the car pulled away, Feels. She watched him in the rearview mirror until the gates swallowed him. When she got home, she shattered. Not elegantly. Not in the polished way heartbreak gets described when people are trying too hard to make pain sound beautiful. She locked the door, Feels, made it halfway to the bathroom, and sank to the floor in her dress and heels and ruined makeup. She cried until her throat burned, until her ribs hurt, until her hands went numb from gripping the cold tile. Feels. Her phone lit up beside her again and again. Adrian calling, Sophia texting, more calls, more messages. She blocked them both before sunrise. By Monday morning, she had slept 3 hours, maybe less. Her head hurt. Her eyes hurt. Everything hurt. Heels. But she had a literature class she couldn't afford to miss. She slipped into a seat in the back row and stared at her blank notebook, while two girls near the window whispered, "Did you hear about the new professor?" "No. The old one had a heart attack." Heels. "They brought someone in last minute. I heard he's brilliant." Isabella barely heard them. She scratched Adrian's name out in the margin of her notebook so hard the paper tore. Then the entire room went quiet. "Good morning," that voice. Deep, controlled. Heels. Familiar enough to make her go cold all over again. She looked up too fast and her neck popped. Vincenzo Moro stood at the front of the lecture hall. Charcoal slacks. Black shirt rolled to the forearms. No jacket, no tie, but it was him. Heels. The same man who had cleaned the blood from her face and told her not to make herself smaller for other people's cruelty. His gaze crossed the room and landed on hers for exactly one beat. Then he looked away. "My name is Professor Moreau," he said. Heels. "I'll be taking over this course for the remainder of the term. I dislike lateness, I reject lazy reading, and I expect actual thought from the people in this room." He wrote his name on the board. "If any of that sounds unreasonable, there's the door." Heels. Nobody moved. "Good," he said. "Open Petrarch." The room stayed silent as he began. Isabella barely heard the words. Adrian's father, the man from Saturday night. Her professor. It would have been absurd if it weren't such a disaster. Heels. But he taught like a man with no patience for mediocrity. No slides, no notes. Just memory, chalk, and a voice that made every sentence feel sharpened before it reached the room. Heels. "Petrarch built a life's work out of wanting what he could not have," he said, pacing slowly. "What does that tell us?" A student near the front answered, "That people want what they can't have?" "Sometimes," he said. Then, without meaning to, Heels. His eyes drifted to Isabella. "Or it tells us that people fall in love with distance because reality asks more of them." Her stomach turned over. She forced herself to take notes, forced herself not to hear meaning where there might be none. Heels. When the class ended, she moved quickly, head down, determined to leave before anyone noticed her. "Miss Ritchie." His voice stopped her. The lecture hall was suddenly empty except for the two of them. She turned. "Yes, Professor?" Heels. His mouth tightened at the title. A word. She walked down the steps slowly. "This is unexpected," he said at last. "You're telling me." He ran a hand through his hair, and for the first time since stepping into the room, he looked genuinely tired. Heels. "I didn't know who you were that night," he said. "I knew my son was seen in Isabella. He never mentioned your last name." A hollow laugh escaped her. "I guess I wasn't the kind of girl you bring home." His expression hardened. "That is not. I'll transfer." Heels. "No," the answer came too fast, too firm. She blinked. He steadied his tone. "Do not transfer because of him. What my son did has nothing to do with your place in this room. But you're still his father. I am aware." She crossed her arms. Heels. "Did you know what he was doing?" "No." "Did you confront him?" "Yes." That caught her off guard. He looked away for a second, then back at her. "I don't excuse cruelty. Not from anyone. Not even from him." The silence between them changed shape. Heels. "This is inappropriate," she said quietly. "I know you're my professor. I know, and Adrian's father." His jaw flexed. "I know that too." He stepped back. "No private conversations unless they concern class," he said. "No favoritism." Heels. "No exceptions." The words were right. They still stung. Understood. She turned to leave, then stopped. "Professor," he looked up. "Thank you. For Saturday night." Something in his face softened despite himself. "I'm glad you walked into that room." Heels, he said. She left before she could say anything reckless. The next few weeks were miserable. He was brilliant in class, Ruth exacting. The kind of professor students complained about and then quoted years later. Heels. And he treated her exactly like everyone else. That should have helped. Instead, it made everything sharper, because she noticed him anyway. The restless pacing when a text got under his skin, the way his voice changed when he read Italian aloud. Heels. The way his face almost lit when someone in class made a genuinely intelligent point. She hated noticing. She hated even more that, sometimes for just a second, he seemed to notice her too. Adrian tried twice to corner her after class. Heels. She shut him down both times. Heels. Sophia sent one message. Isabella deleted it without answering. A hard truth may hurt you once. Denial will keep doing it until you leave it behind. She was done with denial, so she threw herself into work. Heels. If she could not control what had happened, she could at least control her mind. Her essays sharpened, her arguments got cleaner, her reading got deeper. If she could not touch the man teaching her course, she could at least dominate the course itself. Feels. Weeks later, Professor Moreau assigned a brutal paper on forbidden devotion, 20 pages, Petrarch, Dante, the mechanics of desire and distance. Isabella drowned herself in the library trying to untangle it. Feels. It was close to midnight when a voice behind her said, "They locked this floor in 30 minutes. She jumped so hard that 3 books slid off the table. Vincenzo crouched immediately to help gather them. "Sorry, you keep appearing out of nowhere." "Feels," she muttered. "You keep staying after hours." Feels. "I'm trying to survive your assignment." He glanced at the books. "And I can't tell whether the text romanticizes forbidden love or mocks it. It does both." He sat across from her, then seemed to realize what he had just done. She raised an eyebrow. Feels. "You know this is a bad idea." "Yes, and yet. For the next 20 minutes, they talked only about literature. At least that was what either of them would have said if anyone had asked. When they finally left, the campus was nearly empty. Feels. Warm air, quiet walkways, street lamps catching on stone. They stopped at the library steps. Neither moved. He looked at her for a long moment, then said, "There was something I wanted to say that first day after class." Her pulse kicked. "What?" Feels. "That you're remarkable." She said nothing. He kept going. "The way you think, the way you argue, the fact that you keep showing up even when you're clearly carrying more than most people in that room." He let out a short, tired breath. Feels. "I should not know any of that. But I do. You're my professor, I know. This can't happen, I know." Then headlights slid across the road and the moment broke. He stepped back first. "Good night, Isabella. Good night, Professor." Feels. She got into her car with shaking hands. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. By midterms, Milan had turned sticky and hot. The lecture hall felt like a furnace. Feels. Students fanned themselves with papers while Vincenzo lectured, as if temperature were a weakness he personally did not respect. After class, she stayed again. "You're going to make people talk," he said without looking up from the exams on his desk. Feels. She leaned against the front row. "Are you playing favorites?" "No." He handed her the exam, an A filled with notes. Real, not perfunctory comments. Actual engagement. "Your argument on courtly love was excellent," he said. Their fingers brushed. Feels. Both of them felt it. He leaned back in his chair. Feels. "Do you believe what you wrote? What part?" "That desire grows stronger with distance." She held his gaze. "Sometimes distance lets people fall in love with an idea instead of a person. And reality. Reality is harder, but better." Feels. "If you're brave enough to live in it." He was quiet for a moment. And if reality destroys everything, they were no longer talking about poetry. Before she could answer, the door opened and a janitor pushed in a cart. The moment shattered. Vincenzo stood, Feels, gathered his papers, and turned formal so quickly it almost felt cruel. "Anything else, Miss Ricci?" His use of her last name felt like a blade. "No, Professor." She left angry at him, angry at herself, angry at how right he probably was to pull back. Feels. That weekend, Adrian cornered her in a cafe. "We were good together," he said. "No," she said. "I just had lower standards than I do now." He flinched. Then his face hardened. Feels. "This is about my father, isn't it?" She stood so fast her chair scraped the floor. Go to hell, Adrian. But the accusation got under her skin. By Monday, she had decided she needed distance. She sat in the front row anyway. Feels. His lecture that morning was on obsession, illusion, and the way people confuse longing with love. The whole thing felt like a private argument delivered to 40 strangers. Afterward, she told him Adrian was talking. His expression sharpened instantly. Feels. "Did he touch you?" "No." "He talked. He'll spread rumors. He already is. Then stop coming here unless it's necessary." She stared at him. "Fine. That is not what I meant." "It sounded exactly like what you meant." Feels. He turned away and dragged a hand through his hair. "I'm trying to protect you." A dry laugh. "I have survived worse." Then he shut the conversation down. She left furious. She stayed away from him for 4 days. On the 5th, Feels, Milan was drowning in rain. Feels. She arrived early and completely soaked, her thin coat sticking to her skin, mascara blurred, hair dripping onto the floor. He was at the board when she walked in. He turned. His whole expression changed. "You're soaked. It's raining." Feels. He grabbed his coat and crossed the room before she could protest. He wrapped it around her shoulders himself. The scent hit her immediately. Coffee, tobacco, cedar, and the clean warmth of him. "Why didn't you wait it out?" he asked. Feels. "I wasn't going to be late. Class starts in 20 minutes. She looked up at him and said the truth. "I can't stay away." His jaw tightened. "You have to." "Why?" Because your son is jealous, because people are talking, because this can ruin you. Feels. So can anything, she swallowed. At least let this one be my choice. Something in his face shifted. Then he said very quietly, "You do not know what kind of man I used to be." Then tell me, he should have lied. Instead, he said, "Feels, I was not always a professor." Feels. No, she said softly. I was part of something violent. I left years ago, but leaving and being free are not the same thing. She searched his face. Is that why you teach? A pause, yes. To make up for it, to try. Feels. Everything about him suddenly made sense. The scar, the vigilance, the way he clocked exits and windows without seeming to. And then he said, his voice lower now, "You walked into that room." She could barely breathe. "I think about you too," she admitted. Feels. All the time. He looked wrecked by that. "You shouldn't, I know. I'm trying not to be the worst thing that ever happens to you. Maybe that choice is not only yours." That was the moment his restraint broke. Not loudly. Not in some melodramatic collapse. Feels. Just enough. He lifted one hand and touched her face like he had been stopping himself from doing it for weeks. "This is a terrible mistake. The worst," she whispered. Then he kissed her. Not gentle, not careful, not polished. Feels. It felt like two people who had spent too much time pretending they had a choice. She grabbed his shirt. He backed her against the desk. One hand tangled in her damp hair. Her whole body lit up so fast and hard it made her dizzy. Feels. Kissing Adrian had always felt like performance. Pretty, expected, empty. This felt real enough to ruin lives. He pulled back, breathing hard. "We cannot do this here. I know. Anyone could walk in. I know." Still neither of them moved. Feels. He rested his forehead against hers, one hand at the back of her neck. "Have dinner with me," he said. "Night. Somewhere no one will see us. Yes. This is still madness. I do not care." He kissed her once more, shorter this time. Feels. Then stepped away just as voices echoed in the hallway. By the time students started filing in, Professor Moreau was back at the board, unreadable again. Isabella sat through the lecture, hearing nothing except the sound of him saying her name. Feels. Dinner was in a quiet place, tucked away from students, faculty, and anyone who might know them. A restaurant, hidden off a side street, dim enough for secrets, expensive enough for discretion. He was already waiting outside when she arrived. "You're early," Feels, he said. "So are you? I didn't want you standing here alone." Inside, the staff greeted him with the kind of respect that came from knowing better than to ask questions. They were led to a corner table, half-shadowed from the rest of the room. Feels. Dark wine arrived before they even opened the menu, and then they talked, really talked, not just about class or the thrill of doing something reckless. About Sicily, about Florence, about her childhood, about books, about grief. Feels. About the 1,000 choices that become a life before you realize you are making them. Then she asked about the woman who had changed him. "Alina," he said, and something shifted in his face. "She was a prosecutor." Isabella blinked. Feels. That seems complicated. Feels. A faint smile. "She thought so too, and she still married you. She argued with me first." That made Isabella laugh. Then he said they killed her. The laughter vanished. He did not say it dramatically. He did not look away. Feels. He just said it in the tone of someone who had been carrying grief too long to dress it up. "She was the easiest way to get to me," he said. "I'm sorry," he inclined his head. "I left that life after she died, or tried to." They sat in silence for a moment. Feels. Then Isabella reached across the table and put her hand over his. "You are not a mistake," she said. His hand turned beneath hers and laced with it. "Do not say that like you know." "Maybe I don't," she said, "but I want to." Feels. His gaze locked on hers in a way that made her chest ache. Real love does not ask you to become smaller. It asks you to show up whole. That night, when he drove her home, he stopped her before she got out of the car. One rule. She waited. "On campus," Feels. "I am your professor." Feels. "Cold if I have to be. Distant if I must be. I will not ruin your future." "And off campus?" He looked at her for real. "Off campus. I am Vincenzo." She nodded. That was enough. For 3 weeks, they made it work. On campus, they were controlled. Feels. Outside campus, they were honest. Coffee in hidden places. Dinners in quiet corners. Walks through old streets. Long arguments about books that turned into longer silences. Kisses that started slow and ended nowhere clean. She learned he rarely slept. Feels. He learned she swore under her breath at difficult passages. He teased her for being unable to cook pasta properly. She teased him for the dramatic pauses in his lectures. It was easy in the most dangerous way. That was the problem. Feels. Then Luca Ferraro noticed her. Graduate assistant, family money, slicked hair, expensive watch. The kind of man who heard no and treated it like the beginning of a puzzle. He cornered her in the hallway after class. "We should get coffee," he said. "No." Heels. "Come on, I helped grade for Moreau. Could be useful." Stiffened. "No." He stepped closer. "People are starting to talk." Before she could respond, a voice cut through the hall. "Miss Ricci, my office now." Vincenzo. His expression was blank, his tone wasn't. Heels. Once the office door shut behind them, he asked, "What did he say?" "Nothing I couldn't handle. He's watching, so let him watch. You do not understand men like him." "Then explain." He turned away, then back. Heels. "Men like Luca collect information the way other people collect trophies. They wait until it can do the most damage. And maybe we need to end this before he gets the chance." The words hit her like freezing water. "You want to walk away." Heels. Believing his silence made her angrier. "That is not noble, Vincenzo. That is fear." "Yes," he said, and the honesty in it stopped her. "It is." She stepped closer. "You do not get to decide what I can survive." Heels. "You do not know what this kind of fallout looks like." "Then tell me the truth," she snapped. "But do not push me away and call it protection." He stared at her, then crossed the room in 2 strides and kissed her like restraint had stopped making sense. Heels. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. "I think about you every hour," he said. "I wake up with you in my head and go to sleep trying not to. Wanting you is not the problem." "Then what is?" "I am terrified." The words came out raw. Heels. "Terrified of what people will do to you. Terrified of how much this matters. Terrified I won't walk away when I should." She took his hand, "Then don't." 2 days later, Isabella got called to the dean's office. Dean Caruso did not waste time. Heels. "I received a formal complaint regarding an inappropriate relationship between a faculty member and a student." Isabella sat rigid in the chair, hands locked together. Heels. Vincenzo sat beside her, composed in the way people's and determined not to show it. "Is it true?" the dean asked. Before they had gone in, he had told her one thing: tell the truth. So she did. "Yes." The dean turned to him. "Yes, Heels," he said. The room went very quiet. There were witness statements. Students had noticed the after-class conversations. Luca had noticed. Adrian apparently had talked too. It did not matter that Isabella insisted she had never been manipulated. Heels. It did not matter that Vincenzo said her grades reflected only her own work. The university had rules. By those rules, they were guilty. He was suspended pending investigation. She was moved into another section effective immediately. Heels. When they stepped out into the cold air, Isabella looked at him and said, "They're going to fire you, probably, and you're standing here like that's survivable." "It is." "No," she said. "Not like this." Heels. He touched her face once, quickly, while no one seemed to be looking. "Graduate," he said, "do not let this become the headline of your life. Self-respect begins the moment you stop letting other people define the size of your future." Heels. She wanted to argue. Instead, she went to her new class and sat through the stares and whispers and sudden silences when she walked in. The rumor had spread everywhere. In the bathroom, Christina from her old course found her staring at the mirror. Heels. "For what it's worth," Christina said, "Luca filed the complaint because you rejected him, not because he cares about ethics." That gave Isabella somewhere to put her anger, but the bigger problem arrived that same night at Vincenzo's apartment. Heels. Not gossip. His past. Marco De Luca, one of the men from the life Vincenzo had left behind, had started circling again, watching her, taking photographs, making it clear she could be reached. "They think you make me weak," Vincenzo said. Heels. "And do I?" He looked at her like the question hurt. "You make me careful. That is not weakness." He wanted to handle it the old way. She refused. "We go to the police. They won't move fast enough. Then we leave. They will follow." Heels. The fear in him had changed. It was no longer about scandal or losing his job. It was about blood. Then she said the thing she had not planned to say yet. "I love you." He went still. When he spoke, his voice was rough. "Do not say that unless you mean it." Heels. "I mean it." His eyes shut for a second, then opened. "I love you too. That is exactly why I am afraid." "Then be afraid with me," she said. "Not for me." That changed something. Maybe because no one had said that to him before. Heels. No one had asked him to stay beside them instead of trying to shield them from the front. A few nights later, hard knocks hit his apartment door at 2 in the morning. He checked the security feed. His face turned to stone. "Stay in the bedroom," he said. Heels. She didn't argue. Heels. Not because she was meek. Because she had learned enough to know courage and recklessness were not the same thing. From behind the bedroom door, she heard voices. Marco. Smooth, mocking, threatening. talking about her running route, her habits, deals, the things they knew about her, then a crash, furniture hitting the wall, and Vincenzo's voice changing into something she had only heard hints of before, colder, older, dangerous enough to make her blood turn to ice. Eventually, the front door slammed, heels. When he told her it was safe, she stepped out and found broken glass, a shattered lamp, and blood on his knuckles. She got the first aid kit and cleaned his hands at the kitchen table. He watched her in silence, heels. I hate that they can still pull this out of you, she said. I hate that they used you to do it. She wrapped fresh gauze around one hand, then the other. Then don't become that man again. He's still there, maybe, she said, heels. But he doesn't get to make every decision for you, heels. Healing begins when fear stops getting the final word. They spent the rest of the night making a plan. Not a perfect one, just the best one they had. Vincenzo would call in old debts through two men from his past, Matteo and Giovanni, heels, who still had enough leverage to pressure the Rossini family into backing off. It would cost him, but it might buy them time. The next day, Isabella got a photograph from an unknown number. It was taken from a distance, a sniper's angle, heels. Her on her morning run. The timestamp was from that day. The caption said it would be a shame if she tripped. That ended any debate about whether the threat was real. She called Vincenzo immediately, heels. His voice went dead calm in a way that scared her more than shouting would have. Stay where there are people. I'm sending someone for you. A black sedan picked her up 20 minutes later, heels. The driver was a woman, with the kind of stillness that suggested she knew exactly how to hurt someone and hoped not to have to, heels. They drove through Milan in long, twisting turns until Isabella lost all sense of direction. Eventually, they stopped outside a glass and stone high-rise that looked half fortress, half luxury fantasy. Security let them through without a word. Inside, heels, Vincenzo was waiting, but he was not alone. Two men sat on a leather sofa in expensive suits with faces shaped by lives that had not been legal. Matteo, Giovanni, Vincenzo said. Old associates. The older one, Matteo, looked her over with scarred, heels, unreadable eyes. So this is the girl, he said. Vincenzo's expression warned him not to finish whatever he had intended to say. Giovanni smiled without much warmth. Welcome to his nightmare. Isabella sat because Matteo told her to, spine rigid, heels. Vincenzo sat beside her, close enough for his shoulder to touch hers. These men can pressure Carlo Rossini, he said. Marco's boss. How? She asked. Matteo smiled in a way that made her wish he hadn't. Insurance. Giovanni leaned back. Heels. Carlo keeps sins. Matteo keeps Leash's dog. Marco stops stalking you, and everyone lives a little longer. Isabella turned to Vincenzo. The cost? A favor, he said. I thought you were out. I was. And now? Heels. He looked at her directly. Now they threatened you. There was no drama in the way he said it, just fact. She wanted to protest. Wanted to tell him this was pulling him back toward everything he had spent years escaping. Heels. But she could see the terror beneath the control on his face. I trust you. Matteo stood to leave, adjusting his coat. Then he paused and looked at Vincenzo. Alina would be proud, he said quietly, choosing love over vengeance. Heels. When they were finally alone, the silence in the apartment felt enormous. Isabella pressed herself into Vincenzo's chest and felt the tension there. Tell me about her, she said. Alina? She made you who you are. I want to know. Heels. He stared out at the city for a long time before speaking. She was fearless, he said. We met when she was a prosecutor trying to build a case against people I worked for. I tried to scare her off. She laughed at me and told me if I wanted to threaten her, heels, I could at least buy her dinner first. That pulled a small laugh out of Isabella. So I did, he said. For 2 hours she read my life back to me. Every ugly part, every excuse, every person I had hurt, heels. Then she told me I could be a better man if I had the courage to become one. She changed you. She tried. His hands tightened. I was still filthy when we got married, still making money that stained everything it touched. Heels. She never stopped believing I could leave it. And then they killed her. His voice cracked just enough to show where the wound still lived. Because of me. She touched his face. That is not all you are. He looked at her for a long time, then kissed her. Heels. Not desperate this time. Heels. Just tired and grateful and aching in a way that felt older than either of them. The ethics hearing concluded 4 days later. He was fired. The official email was polished and efficient. That somehow made it uglier. Heels. Isabella locked herself in a bathroom stall on campus and cried until she felt lightheaded. When he called, she answered on the first ring. I'm sorry, she said. No, this is because of me. This is because of my choices, he said, Eels, and I would make them again. Then he told her Adrian had co-signed the complaint with Luca. That surprised her less than it should have. Adrian had always looked softer than he was. Then came the twist she hadn't expected, Eels. There was a teaching position in Florence, quietly offered through someone who respected Vincenzo's scholarship enough to overlook scandal in another city. He could leave Milan, start over, but it would mean more than a move. It would mean a life, Eels. Come with me, he said. She did not answer right away, Eels. Not because she did not want to, because she understood what the question really meant. Not romance, commitment, consequences, daily life, a future. Then she said yes. The move to Florence was not romantic. Boxes, exhaustion, Eels. Cheap dinners on unpacked floors, arguments over logistics, old fears surfacing in unfamiliar rooms. They fought sometimes. About money, about stress, about how easily Vincenzo slid into secrecy when he thought he was protecting her, Eels. About how quickly Isabella still assumed she was asking for too much. But they stayed. That was the difference. They stayed. He wrote a book. Not a confession exactly, but a reckoning. A study of violence, guilt, literature, Eels, and the long discipline of becoming someone new. She finished her degree and kept going, eventually writing a book of her own. They built routines, morning coffee, reading in bed, arguments over syntax and sauce, Eels. Life made of small, ordinary things that felt sacred after everything they had survived to get there. Then came Elena, their daughter. Vincenzo was terrified the first time he held her. She looked up at him with dark, Eels, serious eyes, and something in his whole face changed. Isabella watched it happen. The old violence in him had always come from certainty, from hardness, from being ready to strike before the world could strike first. Fatherhood made him softer. Not weak, Eels. Softer. Years later, after his book found its audience, a young woman approached Isabella after an event. My boyfriend is trying to leave gang life, she said. Everyone says I'm stupid to stay. Isabella looked at her and answered honestly, Eels. Hope is not enough. Watch what he does when change gets boring. Watch what he does when no one is praising him. Real change is quiet, repetitive, and expensive, the girl cried. Isabella squeezed her hand. Never fall in love with potential, Eels. Wait for proof, Eels. Vincenzo heard that and smiled to himself. He knew how hard that sentence had been earned. Around Elena's 5th birthday, Isabella found out she was pregnant again. They had assumed one child was their miracle, but spring brought them a son, Eels. They named him Marco, after Vincenzo's grandfather, a fisherman who had chosen the ocean over the Mafia life that had waited for him. It felt like a nod toward the peaceful path their family had finally found, Eels. Watching Vincenzo hold his son with a gentleness his own father had never shown him, Isabella felt something old loosen in her chest. Cycles can break, not by accident, by choice. When baby Marco was 6 months old, Matteo died of a heart attack, Eels. At the cemetery, rain fell over black coats and faces that had spent years pretending grief was weakness. Vincenzo gave the eulogy himself. He did not clean Matteo up to make him easier to mourn. Matteo was a hard man, he said, Eels, his voice carrying over the graves. Eels. He did ugly things in service of an ugly world. But he was loyal in a way that saved people who did not deserve saving. He pulled me out of the dirt and asked only that I become someone worth the effort. Later, after everyone else drifted away, Eels, he stood over the grave and said quietly, I'm the last one left trying to do this right. Isabella gripped his arm. Then keep doing it. That is how you honor him. A hard truth may humble you. It can also keep you moving. So they kept going. Eels. Years passed. Elena started school and came home with opinions sharp enough to rival either parent. Marco learned to run, to shout, to ask impossible questions. Vincenzo's hair went silver. Isabella's writing won awards. Eels. They bought a house outside Florence with a garden big enough for children in silence. On weekends, Vincenzo taught Elena family recipes with a seriousness usually reserved for literature or war. Eels. Isabella read bedtime stories to Marco while he interrupted every other page with commentary. 10 years into marriage, they returned to the same restaurant where they had their first real dinner. Same table, same cheap wine, different people, Eels. Do you ever miss it? Isabella asked. The old life? Vincenzo turned the glass in his hand, watching the red catch the light. Sometimes I miss certainty, he said at last, knowing exactly who I was, what I had to do. How the world worked, Eels, even when it was ugly. You miss the power? He thought about that. Sometimes, he admitted, but I don't miss the man I was. And who are you now? Eels. He pulled out his phone and showed her a picture of Elena and Marco covered in paint from some project that had clearly gotten out of hand. Someone who builds instead of destroys. She smiled. You always could have been. He shook his head. No, feels. I had to choose it over and over. Feels. By the time Elena was in school and Marco had turned every room in the house into a racetrack, Vincenzo opened a foundation for boys trying to leave gang behind. Not speeches, not moral theater, real help, housing therapy, education, job training, feels, structure. Men who understood that leaving violence is not just a moral decision but a practical nightmare. He taught there twice a week. Isabella joined him, leading writing workshops and helping the boys turn memory into language instead of weapons. Feels. At the opening, Antonio, one of the first boys Vincenzo had quietly mentored years earlier, stood up and said, "He told me peace takes more courage than blood ever did." I thought he was lying. A beat. He wasn't. Feels. Vincenzo stood in the back of the room with tears in his eyes and Marco on his hip. Isabella took his free hand. "You did this," she whispered. He shook his head. "We did." And that was true. Redemption does not happen alone. Sometimes it takes love. Feels. Sometimes discipline. Feels. Sometimes shame. Sometimes one person refusing to let you become the worst thing you are capable of. Usually it takes all of them. Years later, in the garden behind their house, they renewed their vows with only close friends and family there. Feels. No spectacle, no performance, just honesty. Vincenzo looked at her and said, "I promise to keep choosing you." Not once. Not when life is easy. Every day, Isabella answered, "I promise not to let you disappear into your old shadows." Feels. And I promise to keep growing beside you. Their children stood nearby pretending not to cry. Both failed. It was enough. More than enough. Sometimes, when they were back in Milan, they visited the museum the old palazzo had become. Feels. They would stand inside the study where they first met. It always looked smaller than memory had made it. Feels. One afternoon, Isabella asked him, "If you could go back and know all of it in advance, my sister, your son, the scandal, the threats, Florence, everything, would you still hand me that whiskey?" He didn't hesitate. Every time. She smiled. In every life? Feels. In every life. By then, she knew what love was not. It was not rescue, not possession, not pain for the sake of drama, not losing yourself to prove devotion. It was work, truth, restraint, choice, and sometimes, feels. If you were lucky and brave and stubborn enough, it was peace. Their story never became a fairy tale, thank God. Fairy tales end too early. This was better. Two difficult people. Two damaged histories, one long decision made again and again to stay. Feels. To tell the truth, to stop confusing suffering with love, to build anyway. And in the quiet after all the noise, that turned out to be enough. Real love does not erase your past. It teaches you how not to live inside it forever.